So the virtues. So I think we both agree that virtuous behavior and producing students that have virtuous character and lead society in a virtuous way is important. Right? That is one of the goals of education.
Yes.
And I actually think that every model of education would agree with that, whether public, whether private Christian, whether classical Christian. We would all say that that's the goal. Even homeschool, right?
Correct.
Everyone would say that they want their student to be virtuous in character, have integrity, all that kind of stuff. The problem is that you can't really have a virtuous people unless you have that virtue rooted in an absolute standard of faith, specifically faith in the triune God of the Bible.
Right.
And I would also say that faith, which produces virtue and undergirds it, that also produces freedom and people that can govern themselves freely. So faith begets virtue, begets freedom. And you can't have the kind of freedom we want in the society that we have without a virtuous people that's faithful to God, that can govern themselves accordingly. And so this isn't an idea that's new to me or to our school. This is an idea that's been around a long time. What would you like to say? I know you've been in the public school, so
you're absolutely correct that all gamuts of education want their children to be virtuous, but it's for different reasons.
Sure.
So we, as with the biblical worldview, want our children to be virtuous because we want them to honor the Lord and serve the Lord in their lives. Whereas traditionally in a public school setting, it's because we want our children to be good citizens who end up contributing to society and paying taxes instead of ending up in jail. So that's the goal. The one interesting thing, when I taught in the public school system, which was discouraging for me, is that I could teach children to be respectful, be responsible, have self-control.
But you couldn't teach them the why.
No why underneath it. So if I can't give them that undergirding of the reason why we're doing what we're doing, then becomes very shallow. And then we resort to, they get a cookie at the end of the day, or a sticker,
it's
or
behavior modification.
And there's nothing, necessarily to say that having some behavior modification is necessarily wrong. I mean, when you have a child and you're trying to potty train them, and you have the little sticker chart on the wall, I mean, those are all things that are completely appropriate. But it's not something that we want them to stay in. We want them to graduate into, I'm doing the right thing because it's honoring to the Lord, not because I'm going to get something out of it.
Right. And when they don't get the reward from living a virtuous life that they're looking for, they're going to learn pretty quickly that, why am I doing this? I can twist the rules, I can bend the rules if that's going to benefit me better, even if it lacks integrity.
So it's outward motivation versus internal motivation.
Yeah, that's good. Well, can you tell us a little bit about how, just in that framework of faith begets virtue, begets freedom, how that applies to the classical Christian education? And I should say, before you go into it, that idea is actually from The Free People's Suicide, written by Os Guinness. And so it's a time-tested idea, and he says that it's his framework that he set up, that you can't have a free people unless you first have a virtuous people, and that virtuous people can't be truly virtuous unless they have commitment and faith in the standard God set before them. And that in turn, that faith will then produce that freedom. And so they all kind of work together. So how does classical education help support those ideas, support the virtuous character and that type of living?
So the classical model takes a step back from, these are the behaviors I want you to exhibit, takes a step back to saying, okay, this is what we want for our children to have internally.
Okay.
And so we look at that goal. We want children to be able to go out into the world and have these values completely instilled in them because of their service to the Lord. So then we make our decisions based on that goal.
Right.
So one of the things that Christian classical education does is it continually points children to what is good, what is true, and what is beautiful.
Okay.
So through a biblical world lens, if God says scripturally that something is good and something is true, then we know that it's beautiful.
Okay.
So through our academic studies, through behaviors and virtue studies, we are teaching our children to recognize God's truth, God's goodness, and God's beauty. And then contrary to that, as they're learning these things consistently through the years, they're learning what is not.
Right.
Because we know, and maybe you can speak a little bit to this, about how society is such that what's up is what's down, and what our children are learning is completely contrary to, they're being taught that things are beautiful when we know scripturally they're not. So
sure, it's the idea, it's the worldview of relativism creeping in, right? You get to decide. Beauty's in the eye of the beholder. You get to decide what you think is good, true, and beautiful. It's not rooted in an objective standard.
So they're constantly being taught these things through scriptural truth, goodness, and beauty.
I love that.
So that's one way, and it's all the way through the years. It's in all areas of the academic study, in every extracurricular activity, every community service that is done is made to point children to those things.
That's awesome. So, I love that lens of truth, beauty, and goodness. What about the specific virtues that we see in the character of Christ? So how does studying the virtues, how do you incorporate that into your curriculum?
Sure. So what we do is we teach children different virtues. We teach them kindness. We teach them justice. I mean, what are some of the other ones that we've been teaching the kids?
Temperance, humility, hospitality.
Right. So those are all different examples of virtues that are being taught throughout the year in all subjects, in all areas. Again, whether it's academic, whether it's behavioral, they're being pointed to these virtues, and then it grows through the years. So they're being taught the same consistent message year after year, and it gets deeper and deeper as the children go through the years.
So it's kind of interwoven into all of their projects, their reading assignments. There's those common themes of those virtues.
And it's not hit or miss. It's very purposely sought after.
Okay, I love that. All right. So I know one of the things that our teachers are doing is they'll focus on a different virtue every week.
Right.
And so I guess with the way it works is that virtue. So let's say it's humility, for example. So all of the literature, all of the assignments, all of the projects will have this underlying theme of humility.
Correct.
Okay, that's really cool.
And then instead of having, with our behavior management plan, we do what's called the shield shout-outs every week during chapel time. And so when the teachers find that the children are exhibiting that character, that virtue, whether it's the one that's being studied now or in the past or in the future, they get a little piece of paper that says, somebody showed justice today in a certain area. And so they are honored for it, but they don't get a cookie. It's because they're being honored in front of their peers, and we're giving glory to God for it.
Yeah.
So that's a really neat and part of the behavior management plan that we have that encourages those behaviors.
Yeah, and I think it teaches them a sense of like a healthy pride.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So it's a cool story I heard from a parent.
Okay.
So this particular parent was just telling me about how much their child's been learning since we've been going through these different virtue studies and talking about at chapel and in their curriculum. And one of the ones that he's really latched onto is justice. And so every time, by the way.
How old is this student?
I think he is
what grade?
I think he's in the first grade.
Okay.
So one of the things he does every time he gets a shield shout out from chapel or whatever, he'll go home and he says the dad said that he has all of them displayed. So he loves it and cares about it so much. He's like he displays them. And so I think the other day, and he'll refer to the virtues. Really? So the other day I think he was telling me that they were. He hit his brother, so he did something he shouldn't have done, right? But then his dad went to talk to him about it. Instead of like just a bad attitude and, well, no, Dad, and like this, he said, he wasn't defensive. He goes, you know what, Dad, you're absolutely right. I hit him. He didn't deserve to be hit. I didn't give him justice. But you know what? Because I did something I shouldn't have done, I deserve justice, and I deserve what's
First
due
grader.
to me. Yes. And so this was incredible.
Wow.
And so the dad told me this with like a lot of joy and delight. He's like, man, this is awesome. He goes, I didn't even have to try to break it down or explain it.
Right.
He goes, it's already being reinforced at school, and there's this whole worldview that's backing up what he's trying to do at home. And so he thanked us for what we're doing, and so I just thought that was a cool story, and I wanted to share it.
That's such an encouragement to know that that what we are pouring into the children, that there is fruit from that.
Yeah.
And I think the thing that's primary with the virtue study is that consistency.
Yeah.
So he's in first grade. Can you imagine what we're going to be seeing when he's in 7th, 8th, and 9th grade?
Yeah.
So that consistency and that repetitiveness and that very purposeful repetitiveness is key.
Yeah.
So
that's great. So, Christy, what other way does the classical Christian education model and the PBCA kind of seek to continue to support cultivating a virtuous character, a faithful people, other than the virtue studies and the lens of truth, beauty, and goodness?
So again, the goal is pointing children to what is good, what is true, and what is beautiful, scripturally speaking.
Right.
And what we're finding in the world today is that our children are more and more being exposed to a very egocentric life.
Right, the individualism.
Exactly. So the individualism of it's all about me. What do I want?
Right.
What are my goals? What are my desires?
Sure.
And children are being taught that from a very young age.
Right.
And what we're finding is that when they're repetitively being taught this, overtly, covertly, however it's being taught,
Sure.
we're finding more depression, more suicide. These
Wow.
rates are going up, increasing year by year,
Okay.
much more than a generation or 2 generations ago.
It makes sense.
And part of that is because they're being taught to be egocentric.
Right.
And so I don't know if you've heard the book The Purpose Driven Life.
Sure, by Rick Warren.
By Rick
Yeah.
Warren. And so, I read that 15, 18 years ago, whenever it came out. And, I just love that book because it really focuses on where we are in the eyes of the Lord. So
Right.
I don't know if you know what the first line of the entire book is.
I don't. Yeah.
It's not about you.
Okay. Yeah.
That's
good. It's good advice.
That's the first line in the book. So again, that concept that biblically speaking, it is not about us. God is our creator. We are not the creator. But our children have been taught through the years that it's all about them, and almost this idea that God is a genie in a bottle, and if I pray to him and ask him for something,
he's going to give me what I want.
He's going to give me, or if he doesn't, then I'm mad, and who is this God?
Yeah.
And so since we understand truly that he is the creator and we are the created, we were made for his purposes alone. And so what we try to do through Christian classical education is teach children throughout all aspects of the academics, through the different extracurricular things that are being exposed to,
Right.
that the children are being exposed to. They're being taught to look outward
Okay.
to one another.
That's great.
Service oriented, and looking up to God for their purpose. So we're constantly trying to find ways that they can be looking out. Now we know that the way that we are created, not the way we were created, but with our sin nature, we are going to naturally look inward. So
Right,
again,
because of the fall. Sure.
Exactly. So again, repetitively having them look outward and upward. And I know we just did something with the children recently. We did the Operation Christmas Child. Right.
Yeah.
And, I know you were part of that.
Yeah. So, I loved it. So, for those that are watching that don't know what Operation Christmas Child is, it's this ministry by Samaritan's Purse where children pack shoe boxes with hygiene products and all these kinds of little toys, and they send it to a child that doesn't have those things or those kinds of luxuries all around the world. So it goes to children from all around the world, and so our kids at our school, it's great because they get to think about an international community, a community outside of themselves, and they get to see how not only just giving them things is impacting them and blessing them in a positive way, but that tied to that and the purpose behind it is the message of the gospel.
Right.
And that these kids' lives are being changed not only by the things they're receiving in the shoebox, but by the message of Jesus Christ. And so it's, again, helping kids understand there's a greater community outside of them, and it's also tying that look outward, that philanthropy, to a purpose, which is the gospel of Jesus.
Right.
So it's an awesome thing.
Yeah. So that's just one example of what we do to try to teach children to, again, look outward. We also do things like we'll try to have older children reading to younger children. We have something during Christmas time where we have older children going to preschool classrooms, and it's like a pajama cookie story day, and they'll read Christmas Christmas stories to the younger children. So any opportunity that we have to have children have that sense of community. Another thing that we're going to be implementing very soon is the house system.
Oh, yes.
Yes, and I didn't even realize that was happening in Christian classical schools across the nation. My first experience was watching Harry Potter and how
Yeah,
they
right.
had do you remember that they
Yeah,
had
Gryffindor,
the sorting hat,
Slytherin, yeah, all
exactly.
those, yeah.
So it's that same
They're like dorm names,
yes,
essentially. Yes,
exactly. So children are put into different groupings
right.
that they then grow through the years with, and so then they start having that community, servicing one another, older ones servicing younger ones, and of course they'll have games and they'll have different things that they will kind of gear themselves towards with winning ribbons or different things.
Sure, there's different competitions.
Yeah, different things that make it fun, but it's again that community feel. So I'm
That's
really
cool.
excited about that.
Yeah.
That's going to be, I think the kids are going to really enjoy that. But it can be fun. Giving to others and giving to the Lord should be a joy. And
Yeah.
so let's teach them how to do this with a joyful heart. And so that becomes ingrained in who they are as they travel into adulthood.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
I love that.